We're getting close enough to the draft now to start asking who is going to be the Vikings' first-round pick. And the mock drafts are actually pretty good at telling us that. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to my hashtag everydayers who have been around every single day, all offseason, all of these 4-0 Fridays. We're running out of them, Tyler. We're running out of 4-0 Fridays before the draft. We got like 2 Fridays left. Day 2 of the draft itself is not going to count. There's more is going on.
Yeah,
for that, which the plans for that are going to be really fun. I'm planning on being live either here on Locked On Vikings or on Locked On Minnesota. And then I will be live as my punishment for the Minnesota football party betting thing, getting last in that. I'll be live all of day 3 on the Locked On Minnesota football party. So come help me with that. And Tyler, you are welcome to come drop by on that too. I assume, unless they tell me I'm not allowed to have guests, which would be very dumb because that would make that very boring for everybody watching.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. The all-new Nissan 2025 Nissan Armada is here. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later in the show. Tyler, you have a tool that you've teased a couple times on this show that we've really not gone into depth on, and I think now is the time. You have you've been meticulously tracking mock drafts over the course of draft season to see who people are giving to the Minnesota Vikings. So before we get into the answers you've gotten, justify this real quick. Why should I care who all the media thinks the Vikings are going to draft?
So one of the reasons why I wanted to start doing this is I wanted to see, my hypothesis was that the media has somewhat of a signal trying to project on how the Vikings would end up selecting. And
I see if they know, if there's like smoke, there's fire kind of way.
Yeah. I had no idea what I would find. I wanted to go about it because I also feel like you can find certain trends when it comes to prospects, like how things look in January and February are significantly different than they look in March and April. And you can kind of start to see how things develop over the course of time. So I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to collect mock drafts. It takes me like 10 minutes a day. I just put it in my spreadsheet. I put it in an article. I post it every Monday morning. And I found that the media over the last 2 years has actually had a pretty decent success rate on who the Vikings end up selecting. So if we go back to 2023, which was the first year I was doing the NFL draft full time without another job, I collected 545 mock drafts from January 1st on. Of those, Jordan Addison was second among total selections, and there were 54 different players, and he had 52 selections, so almost 10%. The only player with more was Deonte Banks, who had 62. He went to the Giants a couple picks later. Last year,
was it the very next? I don't remember.
It might have been the very next. It was within a pick or two. Last year, I collected 838 mock drafts. Now, the sample was much bigger last year because, well, we got a second pick in March. So 2 picks. Some mock drafts did not have the Vikings trading that pick, so you got to have 2 selections. J.J. McCarthy was first at 273 of the 838 selections, but Dallas Turner was 7th with, let's see, I got 44 selections.
That is wild to me because he was in the same conversation as we would talk about Will Johnson, right? The corner from Michigan. It's well, certainly he's out of range. And then it fell differently than we thought, and that gave the Vikings the chance. But in a mock draft where he would, did the mock drafts have us taking him at 11?
Most of them would have had them taking Turner at 23.
At 23. Huh. That's fascinating.
So I think this is kind of where you can look at how the actual NFL draft performs, Luke, because Dallas Turner was penciled in by a lot of people to go 8th. Some had Latu. You and I would have taken Chop Robinson because Choppy Chop.
Right. We were high on him. But nobody thought the Falcons were going quarterback.
Nobody except the Falcons.
Yeah.
I will say, I think it was, I saw Schefter hinted that the Falcons might go quarterback at 8 like a month before the draft. And he's hinting about a couple other teams potentially going quarterback, including, I think, the Dolphins, which would just be wild.
I get it.
But that's how you get prospects like Dallas Turner, who was 8th on Arif Hassan's consensus board, to fall to 17. It was also a very offensive heavy draft. There were 3 really, really good receivers who all went in the top 10. You had 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12. You're going to have your offensive linemen go. And then, well, who are the defenders? There were no like true elite level defenders. First one
was Latu, Byron Murphy, and then Dallas Turner was the 3rd defender off the board.
And they went 15, 16, 17. So it's interesting to look at some of that. And it's hard to draw any real conclusions at this point when it comes to the data, but you can see interesting trends that you can try and use to project forward, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this. I want to see what can we learn from this and how can we use that information to try and be predictive.
Okay, so with that foundation sort of laid, it's instead of just kind of running down the list of numbers, I want to ask specifically, is there anybody on this list that has the JJ McCarthy, oh my God, like a quarter of mock drafts have us taking? Is there an overwhelming favorite, or is it like a group of people?
So if you look at just since the day free agency started, which is so
right, because like all the Ashton Jonty mocks are probably out of it.
So the way I have this built is it's the week of that Monday. I go Monday through Sunday. That's the day. So free agency started March 10th. Nick Ammonwari is the overwhelming favorite.
Okay.
He has been selected 51 times over the last 4 weeks with 70 total selections. And that 70 is 19 higher than second place, which is Malachi Starks. And that tells you, like, the Vikings have been projected as safety more often than not. And it's getting near like 50% of all selections are safety, which is just crazy. And if you include Jahdae Barron in safety, which personally, I think he should be playing a Minkah Fitzpatrick role.
Sure, so, you could call him that.
Yeah.
Or call him a nickel or call him whatever, but D-back, yeah.
I classify him as safety. So that number goes even higher if you include him. The overwhelming majority feels the Vikings are going to end up going safety, which to me is a very interesting signal because Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has been on record saying they probably shouldn't have gone safety in the first round of his first draft. So is he going to be willing to go back to that well? Or is it the inverse? Because he passed on Kyle Hamilton and we see what that's become.
Right.
Will he
want? I thought his regrets were different. Because he has expressed regret over like how, of course he did, right? And when asked about how the 2022 draft flamed out, like one of the things that he cites is that he was trying to do too much. He was trying to like get the value and trade down and still get a pretty good safety when really the simple but perhaps not perfectly value efficient move, taking Kyle Hamilton, was the better move. But I don't remember him thinking that like picking safety in general in the first round is like now a thing that he dislikes. But forget what Kwesi thinks. Do you think the idea of taking a safety first deserves to be as overwhelming a favorite as it is? Or do you think that maybe the Vikings should be a little more open? Like, do you think it's a good enough idea to justify it, I guess, is what I'm asking.
It's a good enough idea, 100%. Will it be the best idea, however the board falls? My personal projections are no. And at A to Z Sports, we've kind of built our own consensus board based on our rankings and our mock drafts, because there's a bunch of us that study this day in and day out. And I kind of looked at, all right, of everybody who's available on the consensus board, who would be the 5 best selections? Malachi Starks is top 15 on that consensus board, so he was out. Kenneth Grant, top 20, because I just went everybody outside the top 20, because you're probably going to have 3 guys outside the top 20 like jump in. So I just kind of like top 20 are for sure out. Everybody else potentially available. Like I think the best option might be a linebacker. Well, everybody knows how I feel about Chad Gamble. I'm obsessed with that guy. I think he's
your guy,
difference maker. He is my guy. But I think safety deserves a lot of consideration because of how Brian Flores has used 3 safeties, and the 2 safeties at the top you could use in versatile ways, even though you might not want to do that. You might want to use them as more over the top guys. And I know we've kind of talked about some of that, but the talent level at safety, plus how the NFL devalues them in the first round, guys like that fall all the time. They fall like crazy. So if they end up falling to 24, you just pounce on a really, really good football player and you don't even think twice about it. It deserves a lot of consideration.
Yeah, and like the idea of the mock draft as an exercise. So I did yesterday. I did a bunch of PFF sims on this one, just to get a sense for how far I can trade down before it starts to feel bad. And I kind of tried to like Goldilocks. It went down to 45. That was too much. And then I went down to just like 32 or 33. And that felt like I could have gotten more. And it like, and like trying to like find that balance just using the mock sims. And I feel like as an exercise, there's a merit to those sorts of like abstract exercises beyond just, okay, here's a draft that here's who I think should go to where. And I want to talk to you about that in a more philosophical sense next here on Locked On Vikings. Today's Locked On Vikings episode is brought to you by Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week here leading up to the draft, we're looking at our favorite draft prospects and picking one guy that stands out. And this week's Nissan Armada clear-cut player of the week, the player that we really feel is a solid and strong evaluation, no ambiguity, just works out. Tyler, would you like to do the honors of the kind of the safest pick, easiest eval in the draft?
Georgia safety Malachi Starks.
Malachi Starks. Okay. We'll talk about him more in the upcoming segments here because I want to get more detail on that evaluation. But that sort of reliability is what we're looking for in the 2025 Nissan Armada. It's heavy duty, it's rugged, it goes big, and it's ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Tyler, I do want to I want to hash out with you Malachi Starks versus Nick Emenwari. Who goes first? Who do we hope falls more if they're both on the board? That kind of thing. But first, let's do the thing that we teased here. The value of a mock draft, it varies wildly to me. You know, this time of year we get flooded with them, and people just sort of posting a list of 32 players and one sentence with each. That usually is the most basic thing to know about a team. And like, you see so much of that and I don't really get anything out of it. But when you aggregate them like you have, and you curate them like you have, you start to notice patterns, not only about like, okay, a lot of teams have the Vikings taking Nick Emenwari, but like that Nick Emenwari seems to be available a lot.
Yeah.
You know, or Malachi Stark seems to be available a lot. So, you know, we can sort of talk ourselves out of these things, or like Jahdae Barron. A lot of people don't think Jahdae Barron falls this far, but there's a lot of mock drafts where it happens to work out that way.
Yeah.
And that's where you can sort of see the, like, okay, if there are, say that the range of 10 to 20, if there are 15 players worthy of going into 10 to 20, well, guess what? Somebody's falling. And that's how you can kind of get a sense for that. So does your exercise give you any of those patterns, or like generally, what are your thoughts on that kind of thing?
So I don't necessarily look at who goes and who doesn't. I most of the time I just scroll down to the Vikings pick and kind of see where it's at, and I'll see like who's right above and who's right below, because quite frankly, there's so much. It might give me a little bit of a better data set, but that would be so incredibly time consuming.
Yeah, I don't. Way more. You'd have to like write an API or something.
I will give a shout out to NFL Mock Draft Database. They do a great job scraping mock drafts, and they give a lot of details on that kind of stuff. So I'd highly recommend go checking that out. But one of the interesting things I find with mock drafts is I think it's a great tool to talk about, hey, where is a guy kind of expected to go, a general area. John Harbaugh actually mentioned, I think it was at the owners' meetings, that they use industry mock drafts all the time to get a sense of generally where players go and what other people think about them to help give them just a baseline. And I think that baseline
to get a lay of the land. Where you're going, okay, am I going to have to trade up past the Steelers to get this guy? Or is everybody expecting him to go at 40 and I can wait? That kind of thing.
It's about understanding the market, and there's a lot of different ways to do so. I think Arif Hassan's consensus board, your favorite person in the world, Luke, I think his consensus board does a much better job than any other singular tool in trying to identify, hey, how good are players? Because consensus, it's almost like that herd mentality.
Wisdom of crowds.
Yeah. Once you really start to get a large collection of people who are intelligent at one specific topic to form an opinion on something, then you can really see how things balance out. Because you know what? I may have a guy like Starks at 5th overall. Somebody may have him at 30th. And
Mhm.
that doesn't really give you a whole lot. But if you get like 100 people doing it and they conclude that, hey, this guy's 11th overall, that tells you a lot more about that player.
Yeah, the like lay of the land thing is what I found myself doing. I used to do mock draft Mondays on Lockdown. I'm not doing it this year. I don't think I did it last year either. And it's because I realized it kind of was just turning into, okay, here's a list of names, and I realized that I could direct my efforts elsewhere and put out something better. And that's why whenever I do pull up the mock draft sim, it is now kind of a, okay, let me take a look at Kenneth Grant and where is he about going? What kind of patterns do I need to look at? Let's say I say Kenneth Grant because he was available in one of the trade down mocks I did last time. I was like, well, we're forcing a trade down. Well, shoot, I wouldn't do this usually. So it's in my head. But like the world where we want to trade up to make sure we get him, maybe they're just super high on him and they want to try to trade up and they're going to use picks in 2026 or whatever to do it. You're watching the board, right? You're not just saying, okay, I'm going to get up to like 10 and that should be good enough. No, you're watching to see, well, when does Mason Graham go, right? What are the other, when do the other defenders on the board go? And when does it become way more likely that Kenneth Grant is super high on someone's board and I'm going to miss out on him? And then it becomes a game of chicken where how far are you going to push this before you stop taking the risk that you're going to lose out on him? And like at what point does it become worth the draft capital you'd have to give up? That is the game that they were playing with Dallas Turner last year. If you go back and watch the like post-draft video propaganda that the Vikings put out, you can tell that they were like sitting there watching, going like, okay, Dallas Turner's out there. We want him. How far down are we going to let this thing fall before we, go force the issue? So that's the kind of like exercise that I can have. But you write mock drafts at A to Z Sports too. What do you use them for?
I like to use them to explore situations at this point. Now we can really start to try to be more predictive because we're so close and we have about as much information as we're going to get outside of, hey, like the couple days before the draft, we know that this team is obsessed with this player. You're going to get that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's right. Sometimes it's Will Levis is minus 400 to go to the Colts the morning of the draft. You really don't know until you know. But what you can start doing is explore situations. So I've explored it where I release a mock draft every Friday, so you'll be able to go read it at A to Z Sports, talking about,
There you go.
okay,
Really
if you
pulling up
take
mock draft Friday.
this position, well, then how does that affect the rest of your draft? What if you trade down? How does that affect this? And if you do trade down, do you prioritize picks this year or next year? So I like to explore different situations because the more you explore situations, the better prepared you are for when the day comes, especially if you're in a front office. If you're us, it gives us a better sense, but so many crazy things happen, like a Laramie Tunsil gas mask that you can never predict. So I like to just use them to explore different nuances, different potential outcomes. So if something happens, like, hey, maybe Campbell's available at 24 and he doesn't go at 14. And okay, I'm going to take that player because I think he's great. What happens if all the defenders you love are off the board, but a receiver's there? Do you take that guy? And that's why I think mock drafts from like January through March are really interesting for that reason. But not everybody approaches it that way, and you have to understand from
Yeah.
that lens.
Okay. Um, in a second, I want to ask you a little bit more about this project. Then we'll get into like arguing about the two safeties. I don't know if we even have different opinions, but one of the most fascinating things, like okay, like Benjamin, what's his name, grinding the mocks. I almost said Benjamin
Robinson.
Morrison. That's Robinson. Yeah, that's not the corner from Notre Dame.
Mhm.
The one of the most fascinating things is looking at some of those players and how the line goes up or down depending on what have to have a bad combine and suddenly they drop 3 rounds and everybody's at sense, which is wild. It's like you already had all the tape on that guy. But for a lot of people who hadn't watched him yet or whatever, that's their first exposure, or somebody who has a good senior bowl and then shoots up, like the Gray Zabel effect has very much happened. And I want to ask you about like some of the like month to month, week to week machinations you've seen with the Vikings. That'll be next here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. All right, moving on with the Locked On Vikings podcast. There's one quick question I have, and then let's talk about some safeties. So from January to March, outside of the changes you would expect from free agency, the Vikings re-signing Aaron Jones and trading for Jordan Mason. Okay, that's going to take kind of the running backs out of everybody's mock drafts.
Mhm.
Outside of that, are there any patterns that you've found in terms of how the media is approaching as this offseason has gone on, the Vikings plan in the first round?
So the one interesting pattern that I saw early on is it was cornerback heavy. Cornerback. It was all about corner. And going into it, it makes complete sense because going to free agency, you were losing Shaq Griffin. You were losing Stephon Gilmore, Byron Murphy Jr. And you already lost Kyrie Jackson last offseason. Mekhi Blackman's coming up torn ACL. Basically, your cornerback room is just void. You need
body. Mekhi Blackman was like the only player in it. And then like undrafted rookies or future deals guys. Like,
yeah. So it was heavy corner. Jahdae Barron has 47 total selections. Just since the beginning of free agency, he only has 12. So he had 35.
Wow. So he was like the guy until free agency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Benjamin Morrison before free agency had 22 selections. Post free agency has 1. And you even like Derek Harmon before free agency. He had 28 total selections. Post free agency, 9. So defensive tackles even fallen down quite a bit when you're looking at mock drafts. Kenneth Grant hasn't got much either. Post free agency, he has 1 selection, and that was the week of free agency, the week of the 10th of March. So we're seeing defensive tackle being devalued and corner somewhat too, but it's really all shifted towards safety, which is also interesting in itself because I think it tells us that the media does not view that safety room as stable long term. You have Harrison Smith.
Harrison Smith is old, right? Who knows?
Josh Metellus.
I think the media still doesn't quite understand the role Josh Metellus plays and how foundational he is to the Vikings, even post Flores. He will continue to be foundational. I don't think the national media is like caught up to that.
The national media has been caught up to the Vikings for 30 years, Luke. They Look, don't understand this team.
We don't need to get into it right now. Okay. I don't need to get in any trouble.
No, we won't get into it any more than that. I've written plenty about the subject.
Yeah, no, I've complained enough.
I do find it interesting that corners really taken a nosedive. Like other than you have Emmanwori, Starks, and Barron, only one other player has had 4 selections. Sorry, 2 players. Harmon had 4 the week of free agency, and so did Savon Rebel. That's it. Calvin Banks Jr. had 5 2 weeks ago. And I think Dane Brugler said earlier today, I think it was on Alec Lewis's show, that it's like 50-50 split on if teams want to play him at guard or tackle. So
yeah,
that one was
I had a show this week. I kind of said that I think he's a tackle, but
I agree with you.
He's like big enough to be. I don't know. I don't really see why, but because he's big enough, he's like Christian Darrisaw size. Like, what's the okay? No, we're getting distracted. So the 2 heavy favorites then are Nick Emmanwori and Malachi Starks.
Mm-hmm.
So of those 2 guys, forgetting the likelihood of who's going to be there or what, both of them on the board, who are you taking, GM?
If they're both on the board, I'm going to take Starks. And I understand, hey, Emmanwori tests like an athletic freak. He looks like an athletic freak on the field. I think Starks is, if he can just get a little bit quicker, a little bit smarter with some of his decision making on the field and not think as much, I think he'll be plenty fine athletically. I think he's much more of an athlete than his like relative athletic score, like what, 5.65 or something like that. Emmanwori was a perfect 10. He's an athletic freak, but I think there are more limitations as far as what his skill set currently is. And he's more of if you develop this guy fully, you just have a bonkers player. But I think Starks already plays like a bonkers player. And if you just role specific, if you put him in the Cam Bynum like spot and ask him to play deep, and you have somebody like Harrison Smith, Josh Metellus to really help him learn a lot of the nuances, I think you have an elite level player down the line, because I think he has that in him. There are limitations, and we've kind of seen he can be a slow reactor sometimes. How much of that is he just needs to not have to play school, and he can just go into the film room on like a Tuesday at 1:00 and just grind
it. Yeah. No GPA needed to stay eligible. I have a hot take. I have some pretty scorching hot. I think that's you're in about the consensus take. I think that's the popular take. I'm with you that I would take Starks over Emanwari if they were both there. But I kind of don't like either of them for the Vikings. I don't like their fit. I don't like in particular that both of those guys are very careful players, and I don't think that's what we want in a safety. That they are. I think both of them are built to be center fielders. Not to say that they can't get in the box. I've seen Emanwari go, lower his shoulder to make a good tackle in the fit. Like it's okay, it's fine, but that's not their style. They're not. Missiles over the middle of the field, like in the kind of way Flores tends to like. They're a little bit more cerebral and thinky and hesitate and break down. They're not looking to blow you the heck up. And if you look at the DBs that Flores has taken, I think of Jay Ward in particular, they've all got fight to them, and even if you want to look at it like Kwesi, specifically, you can then look at like Andrew Booth got a little fight to him. Mekhi Blackman had fight to him, like these guys are like scrappy, and I don't see scrappy in either of those two guys. Maybe I'm overthinking fit. It's like, I feel like we're on the opposite ends of this same conversation that we were having about Tyler Booker last week. But it doesn't feel to me like they're these slam dunk Vikings. I feel like they're safeties, and mock drafts are saying Vikings need safety. Here's a safety. And that's about it. But I don't feel like stylistically they make a lot of sense for me, but they're good players. I see their futures in the league. I just don't see them doing the like trigger downhill, fill the alley, go blow up a bubble screen kind of thing that we always need our DBs to do. So I feel like almost like I kind of want to go against this consensus, even though the efficacy of it is inarguable, of your exercise here is inarguable. I still kind of want to be like, yeah, no, but it's going to be Derek Harmon.
So I'll propose this question, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer it right now because I think it's more of a complicated one. Is it that they can't do it and it's not in their nature, or they were just specifically asked to not do some of those things? Because I think specifically in Emanwari's case, he was asked to do a lot more of the coveragey stuff.
For sure. Every run play asks you to trigger downhill, right? And I don't think that the way he did that, not that he didn't play, basically every safety is going to take 2 steps back and play cover first, but it's that transition from those first 2 steps back, foot in the ground, drive downfield, and how aggressively do you come in that, maybe this is a good thing, but it's so different than from what like Scene would do. Scene would come in like a bat out of hell and really trigger that downhill. And that was part of what people liked about him coming out. Again, maybe this is comforting to you. If you're like, no, not another Georgia safety, I promise you, Malachi Starks is not the same guy. Oh my God, it is such a different guy. Like, don't helmet scout. It's not, it's not the same dude. But I still feel like the idea of a quick downhill trigger, Lewis Scene not working out shouldn't be enough to make you not value that. But yeah, like, I don't think it's about what they were and weren't asked to do. It's about how they did what the play required of them at the time. Like, they did see RPOs. There was a slant that you then, or just an over the ball route that you then had to plant your foot down and like get down and into it. And it just wasn't aggressive. It was a little bit cautious and careful. That's not even a bad thing. It's just a different style than what I'm used to seeing the Vikings do.
And I'm curious about Brian Flores because so much of what he's done has gone against a lot of what he's done in the past. So is he going to change his defense again based on the new personnel that he has? How much evolution are we going to see and how much of the same stuff? Because what was the one thing that Bengal Hawk was the number one thing he loved to do in 23? I don't think he did it once last year.
No, he killed it because of what happened at the end of 2023. That was like the key difference that he did. You're going to get me going for like an hour on this.
I know.
I think a lot of what we've seen from Flores so far has been making do with what he has inherited. He has made a role that works for Cam Bynum, for Josh Metellus, for, Caleb Evans when he was here, for guys that he did not acquire, for Danielle Hunter, right? That he inherited when he got here. And so looking at the players that are only the players that joined from 2023 and onward, Grenard, Van Ginkel, Cashman, but in the secondary, even Theo Jackson is an inheritance, and Josh Metellus is an inheritance. That's why I'm thinking of like the Jay Wards, Byron Murphys, and what the way that they play. Like Murphy in particular is so good at I'm in off coverage, it's a bubble screen, trigger downhill and go get it.
Mm-hmm.
And as a safety, you're going to be lined up on the 2, and you're going to have to do that when you see that he goes, back and hey, right? And you're going to have the instinct to trigger and go hit it versus the like read and react. I love Malachi Starks' brain. I think his brain is the thing that makes him a first rounder to me. And the way that he reads stuff out just makes him a very Sunday player to me in a very universal way. So that's why I'm like a little worried that I'm just overvaluing like one specific thing. But in a general broad, like too vague to really check me on it sense, it's that they're not aggressive. They're cautious players. They just are on the side of cautious versus aggressive, and it works for them, but would it work for us?
I think that's a fair point. Something I'm gonna have to like look inward and try to explore, because I think that there's some merit to what you're bringing up here. Maybe you are overvaluing it. Maybe you're hitting the nail on the head. The only way we're gonna know is April 24th.
Yeah,
what
right.
Vikings
Like
should
if
do.
it's at 24, the Vikings select Nick Emenwari, I'm gonna be like, okay, well, I was wrong about that, and like I'll immediately give up the bad fit thing because obviously I was overdoing the one thing. It's a theory more than it is like. But I don't know. It's a spicy take that I don't know if either of these safeties are the right guy. And I don't know. Aggregate me. Post on Twitter. I can't even stop you. I'm not there anymore. I will see you all next week. Tyler, we will see you all next Friday. That's the last one, right?
It'll be the last Forno Friday.
All right. We're going to have to find a great way to wrap these out. So thank you so much for your time. All of this time, all throughout the off season. We will see you for one more next week. And as always, Skull.